Welcome everybody to the latest episode of The Green Dream, where I talk to a whole group of fund selectors, fund managers and people just generally interested in the burgeoning space of sustainable and ESG investing. So today I'm joined by Camilla Ritchie from 7IM. That's not the most complicated name, Camilla. Apologies. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much for coming. I am Lawrence.
Got that right.
You got that right. Thank you for coming in. Good to see you. Start at the beginning. For me, I'm sure you come across this when you talk to sort of perhaps friends or people who are not in the industry. The difference between sustainability, ESG, perhaps confuses people. How do you explain it? What does it sort of mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's very confusing, and there have been a lot of people who've been bringing out this point and saying, how are you? What is sustainability? What is ESG? Well, I think you have to sort of keep it simple if you can, and I think sustainability is about balancing what we use in terms of resources with what's needed for the next generation, because that's really that's what sustainability is. You need to be able to sustain your resources, and if you don't, and there's nothing left for them, then that's a bit sad.
Yes.
And then ESG is about looking at how things impact on the environment, how people are behaving in social terms, whether people are behaving with good conduct or bad conduct. And governance is really something about how companies behave. And so I'm sure people could think of examples of how companies behave badly, and there are examples of how companies behave well. And I think, we were talking earlier about cars, and I think the big governance story of the last few years has been VW and what they did.
Or Dieselgate,
exactly.
Everything's a gate nowadays, isn't it? Yeah.
So those are the sort of things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about sustainability and ESG. But people quite often get the concepts confused, and sometimes even when you talk about ESG, working out whether something's environmentally good or not depends on your standpoint. And so let's take electric cars, for instance. Theme of cars here, already developing. So if you look at something like Tesla, is it a good company because Tesla cars are electric and therefore they don't emit carbon, or is it a bad company because it uses a lot of resources to make its cars, and then at the end of its car's life, it costs a lot of money to get rid of that car. So in fact, it might be environmentally not quite as good as you think it should be. And what kind of electricity is it using? All those sort of things are really quite complicated.
Yes. And even before you get on to, in the case of Tesla, perhaps governance issues with the fact that, Mr. Musk.
Mr. Musk.
Anyway, we better not go there for legal reasons.
Yes.
And on a sort of day-to-day basis, sort of professionally, how does ESG, or how do you integrate this kind of discussion into the way you look at funds and kind of investments in general?
Well, I try to keep it as simple as possible for myself. I run a fund which has a prospectus which drives what I should be looking for when I'm making investments. And one of the things I haven't mentioned so far is ethical matters. And the fund that I run, which is a balanced risk profile fund, has a number of ethical exclusions. And I think that's important because people need to know what they're investing in order to make sure that they don't expose themselves to risks that they don't know about, reputational risks.
So this would be presumably tobacco.
Yeah. So there are 7 of them. So it is adult entertainment, alcohol, armaments, gambling, tobacco, as you said, and nuclear power generation, and genetically modified organisms in agriculture. And I think they are those are the fairly normal exclusions that most of our clients would like to see. There are other ones that some people ask for, But I think those are the main ones. And actually, we've only recently put in gambling, which is, I think, an interesting point, because perhaps a few years ago, gambling was seen as, so it's not a thoroughly ethical thing, but it's not something that was grabbing the headlines. But recently, because of the online gambling that people do, there are a lot more issues and actually really sad stories about people who get a gambling habit from being. I was listening to the radio programme, and a guy was saying that he got given a free £5 bet and he won on it, and he then gambled and gambled away all his money, lost his family, lost his job, became very depressed, suicidal. I mean, these are really serious things. Absolutely. And so that's why we have developed over the years.
But kept it simple from what you're saying, because as you quite rightly say, I think most people, if you said write down 5 or 6 areas you don't want to be invested in for a variety of reasons, they would list the areas that you've just listed. I
think so. And just to make it clear, we have a 10% threshold, because it's very difficult to say zero exposure to any one of those areas. So we allow a 10% threshold, and that makes it easier to find companies. I think if you made it zero, you'd be really stuck with quite a few, only a very few companies in your universe.
And why do you think ESG, sustainable investing and ethical investing, is quite right, has become so mainstream in the last sort of couple of years? Because if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, we would be probably talking about different things. I think your fund probably wasn't launched 5 years ago, I don't think, in with the kind of mandate it's got. Why do you think it's developed so much?
Well, I don't. It's not mainstream yet, but it's getting to be more mainstream, and I think that's really because of what's been happening. I mean, climate has just been absolutely at the forefront of everything, and I mean, this week we've got the Davos World Economic Forum, and the paper that they brought out before that said that 5 of the main risks were climate related. And you only have to look at what's happened in terms of pollution levels in cities, and we're not just talking about Beijing. I mean, London pollution levels are very high, especially in central London, in the underground. There was a very interesting research piece about how high pollution was on the underground trains, which has rather horrified me. And you've got water scarcity. Look at what happened in Cape Town only a couple of years ago. I think they were days away from running out of water completely, and they've now limited people's use to 50 litres a day, which I think probably to somebody in the Sahara sounds quite a lot, but 50 litres is not a lot per person. So you've got water scarcity, you've got pollution, we've got all these things which are sort of being brought to the fore.
Absolutely. And we've talked already about some of the kind of issues that about sort of clarity in sort of understanding of what what certain companies or funds are trying to do. What more do you think the asset management industry could do more broadly to kind of help investors, people like yourself, but also your clients, sort of better understand the issues?
Well, I think to return to the point earlier about how difficult it is to find out what sustainability means and what ESG means precisely, and I think what's really important is for investors to know what they want. So I think it's very important for you to think, I'm worried about pollution, I'm worried about global warming, I want to invest in a fund that is going to take account of that. You need to look into each of the offerings that the fund sort of managers have to find out what it is that they are precisely focusing on, because an environmental fund is going to be very different to a fund which excludes some business activities which aren't good. So you need to do that by speaking to your advisor, who should be in a position to tell you what those are. But also there are very good websites now where people have compared the fund groups and have aligned them with the different things that they focus on. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it is there if you look for it, I think.
Lovely. And particularly within sustainability, climate change, there's a lot of statistics sort of kicking around. You touched on one.
Yes, I love some of these. Actually,
what are your kind of favourites?
I did bring some along, actually.
I brought some because you're allowed a prompt on this because some of them are quite difficult to remember.
Yes. So 1 kilowatt of electricity from a UK plug socket takes almost 3 kilowatt hours of energy to produce.
Okay,
that's pretty horrifying.
Yes.
I do vaguely understand this because there's a company that that the fund is invested in, which is an energy efficiency company, and they told me that there's a huge wastage between where electricity is generated at a power station and it getting to your whatever it is through your socket and to whatever, and you lose effectively 60%, which is what this is saying, and so.
So that's like water leakage, isn't it?
Terrible. Yes, exactly like that. Yeah. And so what they do is they have combined heat and power generators that they've installed in places like very close to here, actually, St Bartholomew's Hospital. Now has that generators on site. So that is going to cut down a lot on the wastage of that. And the heat that's generated, which of course it just dissipates when it's sort of elsewhere at a huge generation plant, is able to be used for captured and used for heating or actually cooling. You can use the heat for cooling as well.
Excellent.
I've got other ones,
go on.
but go on.
No,
Do you want any more?
Give me one more.
Okay.
Give me one more, because I love the stats. I know that you do.
I think I'm going to tell you that it takes 16,000 litres of water to make just 1 kilogram of beef.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot.
And I could just quickly say, while you're thinking about that, it takes 2,700 litres of water to make a single cotton T-shirt.
Goodness me. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right, let's move on. So on your personal sustainable, if I can say it correctly, sustainable credentials. In your own sort of personal life, what sort of things do you try and do?
Well, I admit that I don't do nearly enough, and when I say that, I'm thinking about air miles and car miles, because I have a car and I do drive quite a lot, and I also go on holiday and sometimes on business even in a plane, which is very expensive. It's not a private plane though.
No names mentioned on that point. But more seriously, those personal ones we've all got, haven't we? Particularly in this in this industry. I mean, plane travel, getting back and forward to another country for research purposes or whatever, is an issue, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think it would be much better if we could do more sort of video conference calls and things like that. But I do admit that there's absolutely nothing like seeing somebody actually in their own environment and seeing them up properly eye to eye.
Yes.
But maybe we could just use more video conferencing. If you've met somebody, maybe the next time you could do it as a video conference.
Good. So sort of going on a little bit on more of your personal habits, I've said here, hand dryer or paper towels, which would you use? Electric car or no car? Well, you admitted driving before we started the interview.
Yes, I don't have an electric car
we were both,
yet,
we were
but
both.
I am thinking of getting one. But there is an issue with range, and I think until the batteries get a lot bigger and more powerful, it would be difficult to use a car other than in sort of urban areas because there just aren't enough power charging points, and it doesn't really work if you're doing a long distance journey.
Do you think much about? I think about the hand towels versus hand dryers, because I can't bear the noise from the hand dryers, and instinctively I think it must use more energy than perhaps it does for the recycled paper. Do you get as granular as that in your thinking?
I did think about it because you asked me, and I think over the long term, electric hand dryers are more efficient but noisy. But hand towels are a better way of keeping bacteria under control, apparently.
Interesting.
So,
Yes.
so you, on the one hand, it's a bit like environmentally, how do you judge it? How, you have to decide what it is that you want to.
Yeah, really good point. Now, the cup of tea it's got to be a sustainable cup of tea or coffee, and you can do that with Greta Thunberg, Sir David Attenborough, or somebody else.
Yes. I think Greta Thunberg is a great girl, but I'm not sure I'd want to have a cup of tea or coffee with her because she's so hectoring. I don't think I get a word in edgeways, and I absolutely agree. I mean, she's very right to focus on the world and climate change, but I'm just not sure that
so
I really want to shoot.
Not...
So, but David Attenborough would be fantastic.
Yes, he always feels like an amazing sort of
guy.
guy.
I mean, he was voted the world's most popular person. And he's been on the stage at Glastonbury.
Yes.
And apparently, when Blue Planet was being broadcast in China, the internet slowed because so many people were downloading it.
Yes.
I mean, he's not just a national treasure. He is an absolute global guru,
yes.
and he's one of those people who's been seen so much, like our wonderful Queen, who has met so many fascinating people over the years. It would be fascinating to talk to him.
Yes.
And the wonderful thing about him is it's not just about the science, which he obviously is really he knows a lot about, but he's really interesting because of all the stories.
Yes.
And that's really why he's an interesting person, and he's. I just can't believe he's 93 now.
I know, it's
absolutely amazing.
He puts us all to shame.
He does really. Yes.
Fantastic.
Apparently they were thinking when he was reaching 65, BBC Bristol was saying, "Wow, are we going to replace David Attenborough? I don't know what we're going to do."
So it's 30 years on, they're still having
yes.
And just finally, I've called this little interview is called The Green Dream.
Yeah. I tried to wear green.
You've done very well. I failed miserably in a very a very blue suit. So if there's something you maybe sort of touched on it a bit earlier, I think in one of your answers, that you could do to perhaps make the world a better place from an environmental perspective, kind of what would it be?
Well, when I was thinking about this, when I think the Green Dream, and of course that made me think of Dr. Martin Luther King.
That's where it comes from. I'm embarrassed to say.
Yes, and so I was thinking, I have a dream.
Yes.
And I think I have a dream that my children and my grandchild live in a world where the air is sweeter, and there is less pollution.
Yeah.
And how would that happen? I mean, that's the difficult thing, isn't it?
Yes.
And so I was pondering about how you can take away neonicotinoids, and that would give you you have more butterflies and bees like we used to have in the old days. So you can do things like that.
Yeah.
But really big things, I think we need to plant more trees.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way of getting rid of some of the carbon in the atmosphere, so that CO2 is sort of absorbed by trees. And I was looking at a couple of stats on that. They're a little bit worrying, actually. There are apparently 3 million trees in the UK, and we'd need to plant another 1.5 million. Sorry, billion.
It's going to be billion.
No, well, it's 3 billion trees we've got, and we need to plant another 1.5 billion, which is an awful lot of trees. But if we did that, that would be able to absorb the carbon, the excess carbon.
And this sort of demonstrates how challenging the whole situation is, because
worldwide.
Yes.
If there are 3 trillion trees, and if there was another trillion planted, that would absorb the CO2 from what's called the Anthropocene period, which is basically us, with the excess carbon that we've produced. So they've got the stats, but we need to do something about it. And of course, planting trees and then getting rid of plastics, and they're connected, because I think that if you planted more trees, you'd be able to use the byproducts of trees to make things to replace plastic. Because there are a lot of natural things that you can use. Like cornstarch makes quite good sort of isn't it ridiculous? We used to make things out of wood, and then in the sort of 70s and 80s say, isn't it great? We can
make
things
out of
plastic that look like wood, and now we're trying to say, let's make things which look like plastic, which are made out of wood. Yeah. But so sort of trees. I think the common theme here is trees.
Lovely, Camilla. Thank you very much for coming in. Thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you so much
for sharing your thoughts. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.